The very thought of you makes my heart sing like an April breeze. Blue.
Carol Sloan is right in there with all the greats.
He's legendary now.
She worked with Ella Fitzgerald and Oscar Peterson.
She was traveling with both the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. But she said those were the guys who were going to change the world. I wasn't.
Rock and roll washed over the country. That's what closed down the jazz clubs.
She and some of her peers are not going to be remembered by the mass public.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Not to be the wrong way here. Are you famous and I just don't know it?
When I was very young, the world was younger than I.
How about that? I haven't heard that woman's voice in a very long time.
I do not care.
I really just have always wanted to be considered one of the best. So I really want one more album before I kick the bucket.
I said, let's do this. Let's do a live recording.
Come on, baby.
When all the Crosbys disappear, Milwaukee stops producing beer.
There are people traveling from Chicago into Japan. And can I produce what they expect? I hope I can. Plus, you got this documentary. Here you all are. I don't believe I'm doing this. I don't believe any of this is happening. Something in myself is saying, you're not quite good enough to be doing this, and you may never get there.
How's it look?
Looks like an old lady to me.
Oh, it's gonna look great.
I'm gonna fall flat on my face. My voice is gonna fail me. I'm absolutely terrified.
All I want to do is shut this damn thing down, and I go to bed.
The minute you get up there, and it transforms.
If you're an artist, what you're expressing stays there as long as you're alive.
I want to convey to the audience, I have been through this. I can still remember the heartbreak. And somehow, I've survived.
And you appear in all your splendor, my one and only love.
What's really interesting about this documentary to start with, I wanted to kind of get into the idea of you guys kind of follow Carol through this moment in time and kind of use that as the crux of the narrative to kind of go, she's about to do this giant performance that she, one of her last, I would assume, was it that you guys got there in time? Was that planned? How did it work out that you were able to pull this whole narrative together behind and count down the days to this performance?
Well, it was late 2018. I met our other producer, Stephen Barefoot. He's the executive producer, and he knew Carol way back in the 70s. They ran a club together in North Carolina when she was down there for a while. So their relationship, fast forward to 2018, and Stephen approached me about the idea of doing a documentary about her, because she had known and toured with so many amazing people in the 60s and 70s, but nobody knew her name in the mainstream. And so I got to see her sing in Chicago. She was then in her early 80s, but still doing a little bit of touring, and I got to see her sing, and I have to say, she blew me away. I mean, even at 82, she sang a cappella, which is something she was known for doing. She would sing whole verses a cappella and then come in with the chorus and be perfectly in tune. And she still had that ability to really just keep the audience in the palm of her hand. And so I just thought, okay, this, not only does she still have it, but her story needs to be told, and we need to get it while she's alive, while she's with us. And so we knew we had this date coming up at Birdland in New York, famous jazz club in New York, named after
maybe the most
Charles
famous.
Parker. Charlie Parker, great saxophonist, played at the original Birdland, and so it was a big deal for Carol to do one more live recording for an audience, and just kind of, she wanted to prove that she was one of the greats and that she still had it. So we knew we had this to look forward to in late 2019. Of course, we didn't know the pandemic was coming, and we didn't know how lucky we were going to be to get this. But thankfully, the owner at Birdland, Gianni Valenti, and his people worked with us to let us bring in a crew of 3-4 camera people, and we had to be very careful not to interfere with the live performance, because that's what it's all about.
Right.
And seeing jazz live, you can't replace that, even with a movie.
Just remember that sunshine always follows the rain.
But we were able to capture that, and then it became clear that, okay, the narrative of the film is going to be her working towards this.
Yeah.
The climactic moment of the show in Birdland as she looks back on her career.
Well, and in addition to the live performance, it was recorded.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was recorded for an album released by Club 44. So
something she was very adamant about.
She was very adamant about it.
Yeah.
And so knowing that so much would already be available and polished, and really made it such that it was an obvious narrative driver for the film.
Yeah. I mean, how much experience with jazz did you guys have? Were you all fans of jazz? Is that what led to finding Carol? What was it about Carol that spoke out to you guys?
I'm glad you asked, because I would not have considered myself a fan of jazz beforehand. I think in working on this film, I realized how much jazz had informed my early memories in my early life, and I really loved it more than I realized. I realized that in a lot of ways in our public spaces, jazz had sort of gone away, in a way over the past 50 years, in a way that was surprising to me, right? But what drew me to the project more than jazz per se, and I think it's the thing that resonates with a lot of artists who we speak with, is that Carol could have been any kind of artist.
Yeah.
She didn't need to have been a jazz singer. She could have been a sculptor or a painter. She chose to follow a muse that spoke to her.
Yeah.
And that's the tension throughout the film.
Yeah.
Do I choose to go a different path that will maybe make me a little more money, maybe make me a little more famous, or do I stick with who I actually believe that I am?
Yeah.
And that is a bold choice, and it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And what Michael has done well is capture the double-edged sword of that.
Yeah.
The way in which that choice is extremely gratifying, but comes with some extremely deep lows in Carol's life.
Yeah. I mean, more than jazz, I think what's universal about it, and that anybody can relate to, is just that idea of being an artist and wanting to be appreciated for what you do.
Yeah.
Whether it's jazz, whether it's rock, whether it's painting, whatever.
Or something you feel compelled to do without necessarily knowing why.
Yes.
And that's upsetting. I mean, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and she was not a business person. She never did well with money. She was the first to admit, she would spend her money on booze. And, there was a time when she was bankrupt, and many times where she didn't know where she was going to go, but she knew that she needed to sing. And that was what she was born to do. She felt that at the age of 14 when she first heard Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald and all these great black singers on the radio. She knew that's what she wanted to do and emulate, and she stuck with it miraculously. But for me, jazz, I am a jazz lover, and I love, there's some great jazz clubs in Chicago where I lived for a long time, and I would go to the Green Mill, and it's just, it's like the idea of going back in time when there was no internet, you could unplug and just really like pay attention to this live performance. It's a live orchestration.
Yeah.
That's being created in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's based on a standard, based on a song that exists, but then the musicians and the singer together are going to take it somewhere that not only has it never been, but it'll never go again.
Yeah.
And it'll be that one time. And that's what's so special about jazz.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines that she says is, a true jazz singer never sings the same song twice.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. She said that to us so much. When we were with her, it's like we couldn't stop her from saying that. It was like her greatest lesson was like, we'll never sing it the same way twice.
You know, I would imagine that it's hard. If I was thinking about somebody coming to me and asking me to do a movie about me, right? I would imagine, especially with how much she's faced in her life and how, you know, she should really be super famous, but she's very obscure.
Here is a gal opening our show tonight, one of the most musical, fine voices. I mean that from the heart. Would you welcome Miss Carol Sloan?
I was on that first 15 minutes. I was called the queen of the first 15. I lived in 30-something street. NBC's on 50th Street. They'd call me and say, can you do the show tonight?
And having all that behind her, and how, you know, the most important thing for a documentarian is to gain the trust of the subject that they're dealing with. So how long did it take you to really gain her trust? How much convincing did you have to do and let her know? And did you have to show her something that was going to, you know, alleviate maybe some of the concerns she might have had?
Yeah, that was a big piece of it, and I was nervous, just knowing the types of people she had sung with and for. I mean, she not only played with and opened for Oscar Peterson, who's a great jazz pianist, but a lot of great comedians.
She mentioned that Richard Pryor opened for her.
Right. Big names.
Yeah.
And so I was very nervous talking to her, but really got to know her over the phone before shooting, and found that she was very open. She was a bit hesitant, though, at first about exactly how much we were going to discuss about personal stuff. And when we were first coming to her home outside Boston, she said, "Okay, you can come into the living room, and we can do an interview there, but then you're leaving." And we got there, and she was like, "Oh, you need to come back. You need to come back to the bedroom because that's where I have my computer, and I'm going to play some music for you." And she played us all these Sarah Vaughan songs and everybody else, and by the end of the week, we were all over her apartment, and we were like, it was like, you know, it was a small crew, 5 or 6 of us plus her, and so it was like living with a master who was giving us all her knowledge and wisdom, but she was getting this like great social experience.
But the friendship that she had for so many years with Stephen Barefoot was really, that was pivotal. It was an absolute necessity to streamline that process. And really, you know, one of the principal impetuses for this film was Carol's asking Stephen whether at the end of her life, or at the end of the day, would anybody remember her? And would anybody care about the effort that she had put into learning from these great masters and then carrying on that tradition? And at that moment, that was so affecting for Stephen that he decided he needed to be able to answer that yes. And so that really set the stage for Michael coming in and building that slow, actually pretty rapid process of gaining her trust. Right? Because she did want to know that she had made a contribution.
It's interesting because you get a unique experience as a filmmaker, not just following a person and then telling their story, but you get to also film a concert on top of that. So talk a little bit about how uniquely different that is and how much that for you helped your process.
It was, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was very stressful. It was a stressful week because we knew we only had just under a week
At
before she
Birdland.
was going to.
Yeah.
It was a stressful week leading up to Birdland.
Yeah.
So the really principal production was the week prior, meet her at her home, and really we weren't even sure what the plan was necessarily going to be, because so much of it revolved around whatever she was going to be doing with her day.
Yeah.
And she would let us know if she was ready for us early or if we'd come later. We wanted to be respectful of her time, so we had to dance around that a lot and do a lot of work to really get her to be willing to go out to some places and things. But we got these just amazing, and this is the magic of documentaries that you can't plan. The very first day, went with her to the grocery store.
Yeah.
She's just getting her groceries.
What a great opening scene that is.
And that ended up being the first scene, but it was, and none of it was scripted. I've had people say, "Really? Did you put words in people's mouth?" Because we went in. She just walks in on her own, and we're following the camera, and I'm thinking, I don't have any
clearance or
anything. We're just going to walk in and get kicked out. And so I go in, and the manager there happens to not only be very generous with her, because she's missing her cane, and she wants to get her cane back, and that's the whole thing. And then he says, "Well, what is the deal with this crew?" And she says, "Well, they're here to document my life and my story." And it couldn't have been a more perfect conversation to basically tell you in a nutshell who is Carol Sloan and why is she important.
Right.
And so that stayed. But then, so there was a lot of those moments that we caught her in her real life, and also intimate moments in the apartment where we had her listening back to her old recordings, which caused her to, get very emotional.
Yeah.
But then getting ready for the concert was a different beast, because we were not able to scout beforehand.
Sure.
We weren't able to go to New York. We just didn't have the budget for it.
Yeah.
And so all of it was done remotely over phone calls. And, I think when you're getting in, the concert venue is concerned with making sure their show goes off well.
Right.
They don't want a film crew kind of
impeding
being in the
that.
way.
Yeah.
And so you have to be respectful of that, but you also have to say, hey, we only have one chance to get this.
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 nights actually, but that was it, that weekend. And so what ends up in the film is kind of a combination of the best of both nights.
Yeah.
But we just got lucky, and I think we were nice enough. And Carol really was generous about us letting us come backstage with her in the green room as she's getting ready. She really laid it all bare. I mean, that was one of the most special things, is that she was willing to show us her full self.
Yeah.
And I really felt that if I was going to do this project in the beginning, I felt that what we needed to do was not to just show her as a performer, but who is she as a person?
Yeah.
How are we going to relate to her and her struggle as a human?
Yeah.
Because that informs so much of her music and what she sings about.
But I wanted to say that I think her age was important in her being willing to lay everything out.
Sure.
Absolutely.
She didn't need to save anything for later on.
Yeah.
She could just be... That's why I think her example is more than just an example of being a singer.
Yeah.
She showed how to be graceful.
Yeah.
And how to show that she was living something that was bigger than herself.
Yeah.
And if she had been a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, somebody who had retired, it wouldn't have been the same film.
Yeah,
Honesty wouldn't have been available.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you had come to me and told me, here's a woman who spent time with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and that's not even part of the story at all, and I would have been like, why not? Why aren't you covering that?
Yes.
And it's like, and then you sit down with her and you see the magic that she is, and it's incredible.
It's clear.
It's amazing. I'm curious, what did she leave with you that you didn't have going in, that you didn't expect to get from this experience?
Well, a mirror to, I think our own, to wax a little philosophical, which is my want. I think she gave us a little bit of a mirror into seeing the kinds of expression, artistic expression that we would have liked to have been able to, that we want to pursue in the way that Carol pursued them.
Yeah.
And it's and so having that example to us has been, I found it very life affirming.
Nice.
To feel as though we are trotting along a trail that she blazed, albeit in a slightly different path, and it feels as though she's given us a little bit of her blessing in terms of moving on with our own careers. And
that's amazing.
And so, the honesty that you see with Carol is probably the biggest gift that we received.
Yeah. She let us into her home and her whole life, and I personally just felt I got to spend 6-7 days witnessing a master in a very close-up environment, and I just feel very fortunate to have been there. And I think she instilled in me maybe a bit more of a feeling of responsibility to carry whatever of the torch I can to the future as much as possible. I think if this film could be a living document, a living historical document, not only to her, but as a tribute to jazz and American music and where it all came from. I mean, I feel a bit of a burden on my shoulders to do that now.
Yeah.
Everyone knows about Birdland around the world. If I say, oh, I'm at Birdland, they stop and listen.
It means something to be in that room that is a continuing legacy, named for one of the great black jazz musicians. Every time I perform there, I'm aware of that.
And that just makes you nervous too. Can I keep up? Can I produce what they expect? I hope I can.
I've probably recorded close to 1,000 live shows in 50 years. This is important. I mean, she's part of the history of this music. I think capturing her at this point in her life and in our lives is a really big deal.
She was a force to be reckoned with, and wish she could be here now, but she really, I do feel fortunate she gave it her blessing before she left us.
But one thing I want to say, it's important, I think it's important that we've pressed upon people that we're not trying to bring jazz back.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's only going to have so much of an audience.
Sure.
But what is something that's going to resonate is that torch passing that Mike was talking about. And I don't think Carol herself was ever arguing that we needed to set jazz in stone, because she was going on at the before the concert.
Yeah.
She was going on giving lectures and speaking with students and putting on choral workshops. And so I think that she herself would have said, I love jazz, but stick with the spirit of what it means.
Yeah.
Stick with the spirit of jazz. And that may be something different for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
But you're not going to replace one thing you can't separate from jazz is the intelligence.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, what Carol would say is imbue your art with love and intelligence.
I would also say that there's something that she resonated, what she was talking to that resonated deeply with me was be daring, be bold. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid of who you are and what you're doing.
Right.
Go out there and do it. Even if it's unconventional and not true to the form, or if somebody tells you it's not the way we do things, who cares?
Right.
Go out and do it.
And you have a good example in an 82-year-old woman wearing Tom's shoes walking around. I mean, it's like she's not afraid to be herself.
Yeah.
And so we really shouldn't be afraid to be ourselves.
Yeah. What is it about independent film? What do you love about being an independent filmmaker?
Well, I talked about honesty.
Yeah.
Right? I like the permission to be honest. There's that lure of the marketplace, which is always trying to make you want to dumb down or sex up a story. But 99.9% of life is not that.
Yeah.
Right? And so I mean, I can't speak for others, but I think that what attracts people to independent film is the fact that it is a very accessible bastion of truth.
Nice. Authenticity.
Authenticity, that in itself is transformative.
Nice.
I mean, you know, when you see something that is true, that is real, sometimes it's not something that it's real because you and I made it that way.
Right.
Because
it's
reflecting
there.
what's there, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's what is appealing.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. I think independent film, I think as a creative, is the best way to have control of your own enterprise, your own storytelling. And, you know, I have nothing against people being paid to do certain work, but I think if you're coming at it from the standpoint of feeling compelled to tell a story for art's sake, you know, this film I hope reflects that, and I think Carol's career reflects that. It's this idea that yeah, you kind of want to have some ownership of what you're doing, and I think you can do that with independent film. Of course, it's always fundraising, and there's an uphill battle to it. There's a lot of sacrifice to it, but it's
not always there's a reward to it either.
Right, and there's not always a reward. The reward has to be the creation of the thing.
But you see, even in this conversation, these are all parallels of Carol's life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same dilemma.
Yeah.
Do I reflect something which is a truth, or do I make some sort of sacrifice that makes me money?
Yeah.
And you know, she struggled with that her whole life.
Yeah.
And
she never got one residual for any of the 30 plus albums she produced. I think she got maybe $300 for the 2 Columbia Records albums that put her on the charts, and
that's crazy.
Yeah. So she never, and she's not alone. Many musicians suffer the same thing. Many singers.
Pavarotti used to come out of his dressing room, and as he walked to the stage to go on, he used to say, "I'm going to die." Very dramatically, "I'm going to my death. I'm going to die."
At the end of the day, did she get to see this film at all? Did you?
She did.
Oh,
she saw something very close to the finished product.
Okay.
And she did, you know, she even gave a little bit of critique.
Nice, you got notes.
We got notes.
Wouldn't have been Carol if
I was going to say,
but
probably par for the course,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But I was pleasantly surprised at how few notes she had.
Yeah.
Really, the stuff she responded to was, the main one was towards the end of the film, there's a montage leading up to Birdland. And I used a classical piece of music that she had actually played for us when we were there. And I thought, oh, she might actually like this because she loves classical music as well. And I thought it might be just this cool kind of fusion of jazz and elevating it to that level.
Well, she also talked about how she would get into the zone with some classical music.
Yeah.
You know, so
she would often listen to classical music to get her ready. So, but she heard that and she said, "Why is there classical music in my jazz movie? Put a jazz song in there." And actually, I put a different song in there, and I think she was absolutely right. So, thanks, Carol.
When skies are cloudy and gray, they're only gray for one day. Wrap your troubles in dreams and dream your troubles away. When sunshine peeps through, there is only one thing to do. You got to wrap your troubles in dreams, dream your troubles away. Castles may crumble, it's fate after all. Life's so funny that way. No use to grumble, smile as they fall. Was she king for a day? Yeah, just remember that sunshine always follows the rain. Wrap your troubles in dreams and dream your troubles away. You got to wrap your troubles in dreams and dream your troubles away. You got to wrap your troubles in dreams and dream your troubles away.